It's also very, very clear that for Africa to transform, we need a conducive continental environment, and we also need a conducive global environment.
So we need to workshop the best path for us, to achieve our aspirations without having to learn from our own mistakes. So it's important that we continue to convene, have these conversations, and see how we work together for the betterment of our continent.
In March 1975, the African continent rose to its feet, and heads of state came together to realize an ideal of economic and financial solidarity, the African Solidarity Fund, ASF.
Ça fait naturellement de nous une vieille institution. En Afrique, lorsqu'on parle d'âge, ça renvoie à la sagesse, ça renvoie également à l'expérience.
The mission of this Pan-African institution is to pool the resources of member states in order to finance the continent's economic development. A veritable tool for economic and social integration. Its headquarters is based in Niamey, Niger. It is managed by a multidisciplinary team of nationals from its member states, under the leadership of Mr. Abdourahmane Diallo.
On est parti des indépendances dans les années 60, tout était à faire. Les idées économiques commençaient à gérer. J'ai un bon projet. Je veux contribuer au développement de mon pays, contribuer à la création d'emplois. L'idée est bonne, c'est reconnu, mais je n'ai pas de ressources pour mettre en œuvre véritablement le projet, c'est-à-dire accès au financement. Ce qui empêchait, gênait l'accès au crédit, c'était la garantie. Parce que les banques à l'époque, les bailleurs de manière générale, avaient une perception assez spécifique du risque, surtout dans nos pays. Ils ont pensé à mettre en œuvre une institution qui pouvait offrir à ces banques des mesures d'apaisement, donc des facteurs d'atténuation du risque. Ils ont créé un fonds de garantie.
Pour se rapprocher davantage des acteurs économiques des différents pays membres, l'UFSA a déployé en 2021 une stratégie d'ouverture de missions résidentes avec l'ouverture de la première maison résidente en île Maurice en 2022, en janvier 2022. Et la deuxième mission résidente en Côte d'Ivoire en janvier 2023. Mais à l'horizon 2025, nous avons en perspective l'ouverture de deux autres missions résidentes. Une à Kigali, pour prendre en charge convenablement toute l'Afrique de l'Est, et une autre à Libreville, pour l'Afrique centrale.
The ASF, through its growing involvement and diplomatic offensive, has succeeded in mobilizing the symbolic figures of the African leadership, including the President of the African Union Commission, S.E. Moussa Mahamat Faki, the President of the African Development Bank, the Arab Bank for Economic Development of Africa State, Badia, as well as several African heads of state.
Récemment, on a été admis en tant qu'observateur au niveau de l'Union africaine. Mais la finalité, c'est qu'on devienne véritablement une agence spécialisée de l'Union africaine.
Il est appelé à se faire connaître à travers ses États membres, certes, mais également à travers l'Afrique, parce que nous ambitionnons de voir l'ensemble des pays africains adhérer au fonds pour véritablement contribuer au développement économique du continent.
Avec ce qu'on est en train de faire dans le cadre de la mobilisation des ressources, certainement qu'on va devenir le fonds de garantie le mieux capitalisé d'Afrique. Actuellement, on est associé à tout ce qui se fait dans le cadre du financement du développement en Afrique, que ce soit au niveau de l'Union africaine, que ce soit avec la BAD, Africatalyst, toutes les institutions qui comptent véritablement en Afrique. On va essayer de consolider nos positions, solidifier davantage nos fonds propres, améliorer notre notation financière, parce qu'actuellement, on est quand même noté par Moody's. Donc ça, on va essayer de l'améliorer, de sorte à ce que notre signature soit à un niveau, mais véritablement, de crédibilité incontestable.
Today is quite, I would say, a significant milestone because we've managed to convene an event at the sidelines of the Africa Development Bank annual meetings, to further our conversations around the African Association of Multinational Financial Institutions, or what we call the Africa Club.
What AAMFI stands for and what we are proud of as a member, as a founding member, is that African institutions that were set up to develop the continent are coming together to mobilize our resources, our influence, and be able to do more in Africa.
The Alliance's formation underscores the collective commitment of its members to support Africa's self-reliance and sustainable economic development, leveraging homegrown solutions and resources for the continent's transformation.
We have the duty to transform Africa into an economy that is prosperous, an economy that ensures that everybody, every African, benefits from the process of inclusive growth and sustainable development. And when you look at the reform of the global financial architecture, it's also very, very clear that for Africa to transform, we need a conducive continental environment, and we also need a conducive global environment.
So we need to workshop the best path for us, to achieve our aspirations without having to learn from our own mistakes. So it's important that we continue to convene, have these conversations, and see how we work together for the betterment of our continent.
In March 1975, the African continent rose to its feet, and heads of state came together to realize an ideal of economic and financial solidarity. The African Solidarity Fund, ASF.
Ça fait naturellement de nous une vieille institution. En Afrique, lorsqu'on parle d'âge, ça renvoie à la sagesse, ça renvoie également à l'expérience.
The mission of this Pan-African institution is to pool the resources of member states in order to finance the continent's economic development. A veritable tool for economic and social integration. Its headquarters is based in Niamey, Niger. It is managed by a multidisciplinary team of nationals from its member states, under the leadership of Mr. Abdourahmane Diallo.
On est parti des indépendances dans les années 60. Tout était à faire. Les idées économiques commençaient à germer. J'ai un bon projet. Je veux contribuer au développement de mon pays, contribuer à la création d'emplois. L'idée est bonne, c'est reconnu, mais je n'ai pas de ressources pour mettre en œuvre véritablement le projet, c'est-à-dire accès au financement. Ce qui empêchait et gênait l'accès au crédit, c'était la garantie. Parce que les banques à l'époque, les bailleurs de manière générale, avaient une perception assez spécifique du risque, surtout dans nos pays. Ils ont pensé à mettre en œuvre une institution qui pouvait offrir à ces banques des mesures d'apaisement, donc des facteurs d'atténuation du risque. Ils ont créé un fonds de garantie.
Pour se rapprocher davantage des acteurs économiques des différents pays membres, l'UFSA a déployé en 2021 une stratégie d'ouverture de missions résidentes avec l'ouverture de la première mission résidente en île Maurice en 2022, en janvier 2022. Et la deuxième mission résidente en Côte d'Ivoire en janvier 2023. Mais à l'horizon 2025, nous avons en perspective l'ouverture de 2 autres missions résidentes. Une à Kigali pour prendre en charge convenablement toute l'Afrique de l'Est et une autre à Libreville pour l'Afrique centrale.
The ASF, through its growing involvement and diplomatic offensive, has succeeded in mobilizing the symbolic figures of the African leadership, including the President of the African Union Commission, S.E. Moussa Mahamat Faki, the President of the African Development Bank, the Arab Bank for Economic Development of Africa State Badia, as well as several African heads of state.
Récemment, on a été admis en tant qu'observateur au niveau de l'Union africaine. Mais la finalité, c'est qu'on devienne véritablement une agence spécialisée de l'Union africaine.
Il est appelé à se faire connaître à travers ses États membres, certes, mais également à travers l'Afrique, parce que nous ambitionnons de voir l'ensemble des pays africains adhérer au fonds pour véritablement contribuer au développement économique du continent.
Avec ce qu'on est en train de faire dans le cadre de la mobilisation des ressources, certainement qu'on va devenir le fonds de garantie le mieux capitalisé d'Afrique. Actuellement, on est associé à tout ce qui se fait dans le cadre du financement du développement en Afrique, que ce soit au niveau de l'Union africaine, que ce soit avec la BAD, Afrexim Bank, toutes les institutions qui comptent véritablement en Afrique. On va essayer de consolider nos positions, solidifier davantage nos fonds propres, améliorer notre notation financière parce qu'actuellement, on est quand même noté par Moody's. Donc ça, on va essayer de l'améliorer, de sorte à ce que notre signature soit à un niveau, mais véritablement, de crédibilité incontestable.
Today is quite, I would say, a significant milestone because we've managed to convene an event at the sidelines of the Africa Development Bank annual meetings, to further our conversations around the African Association of Multinational Financial Institutions, or what we call the Africa Club.
What AAMFI stands for and what we are proud of as a member, as a founding member, is that African institutions that were set up to develop the continent are coming together to mobilize our resources, our influence, and be able to do more in Africa.
The Alliance's formation underscores the collective commitment of its members to support Africa's self-reliance and sustainable economic development, leveraging homegrown solutions and resources for the continent's transformation.
We have the duty to transform Africa into an economy that is prosperous, an economy that ensures that everybody, every African, benefits from the process of inclusive growth and sustainable development. And when you look at the reform of the global financial architecture, it's also very, very clear that for Africa to transform, we need a conducive continental environment, and we also need a conducive global environment.
So we need to workshop the best path for us, to achieve our aspirations without having to learn from our own mistakes. So it's important that we continue to convene, have these conversations, and see how we work together for the betterment of our continent.
In March 1975, the African continent rose to its feet, and heads of state came together to realize an ideal of economic and financial solidarity, the African Solidarity Fund, ASF.
Ça fait naturellement de nous une vieille institution. En Afrique, lorsqu'on parle d'âge, ça renvoie à la sagesse, ça renvoie également à l'expérience.
The mission of this Pan-African institution is to pool the resources of member states in order to finance the continent's economic development. A veritable tool for economic and social integration. Its headquarters is based in Niamey, Niger. It is managed by a multidisciplinary team of nationals from its member states, under the leadership of Mr. Abdourahmane Diallo.
On est parti des indépendances dans les années 60. Tout était à faire. Les idées économiques commençaient à germer. J'ai un bon projet. Je veux contribuer au développement de mon pays, contribuer à la création d'emplois. L'idée est bonne, c'est reconnu, mais je n'ai pas de ressources pour mettre en œuvre véritablement le projet, c'est-à-dire accès au financement. Ce qui empêchait et gênait l'accès au crédit, c'était la garantie. Parce que les banques à l'époque, les bailleurs de manière générale, avaient une perception assez spécifique du risque, surtout dans nos pays. Ils ont pensé à mettre en œuvre une institution qui pouvait offrir à ces banques des mesures d'apaisement, donc des facteurs d'atténuation du risque. Ils ont créé un fonds de garantie.
Pour se rapprocher davantage des acteurs économiques, des différents pays membres, l'UFSA a déployé en 2021 une stratégie d'ouverture de missions résidentes avec l'ouverture de la première mission résidente en île Maurice en 2022, en janvier 2022. Et la deuxième mission résidente en Côte d'Ivoire en janvier 2023. Mais à l'horizon 2025, nous avons en perspective l'ouverture de 2 autres missions résidentes. Une à Kigali, pour prendre en charge convenablement toute l'Afrique de l'Est, et une autre à Libreville, pour l'Afrique centrale.
The ASF, through its growing involvement and diplomatic offensive, has succeeded in mobilizing the symbolic figures of the African leadership, including the President of the African Union Commission, S.E. Moussa Mahamat Faki, the President of the African Development Bank, the Arab Bank for Economic Development of Africa State Badia, as well as several African heads of state.
Récemment, on a été admis en tant qu'observateur au niveau de l'Union africaine. Mais la finalité, c'est qu'on devienne véritablement une agence spécialisée de l'Union africaine.
Il est appelé à se faire connaître à travers ses États membres, certes, mais également à travers l'Afrique, parce que nous ambitionnons de voir l'ensemble des pays africains adhérer au fonds pour véritablement contribuer au développement économique du continent.
Avec ce qu'on est en train de faire dans le cadre de la mobilisation des ressources, certainement qu'on va devenir le fonds de garantie le mieux capitalisé d'Afrique. Actuellement, on est associé à tout ce qui se fait dans le cadre du financement du développement en Afrique, que ce soit au niveau de l'Union africaine, que ce soit avec la BAD, Afreximbank, toutes les institutions qui comptent véritablement en Afrique. On va essayer de consolider nos positions, solidifier davantage nos fonds propres, améliorer notre notation financière parce qu'actuellement on est quand même noté par Moody's. Donc ça, on va essayer de l'améliorer de sorte à ce que notre signature soit à un niveau, mais véritablement de crédibilité incontestable.
Today is quite, I would say, a significant milestone because we've managed to convene an event at the sidelines of the Africa Development Bank annual meetings, to further our conversations around the African Association of Multinational Financial Institutions, or what we call the Africa Club.
What AAMFI stands for and what we are proud of as a member, as a founding member, is that African institutions that were set up to develop the continent are coming together to mobilize our resources, our influence, and be able to do more in Africa.
The Alliance's formation underscores the collective commitment of its members to support Africa's self-reliance and sustainable economic development, leveraging homegrown solutions and resources for the continent's transformation.
We have the duty to transform Africa into an economy that is prosperous, an economy that ensures that every African benefits from the process of inclusive growth and sustainable development. And when you look at the reform of the global financial architecture, it's also very, very clear that for Africa to transform, we need a conducive continental environment, and we also need a conducive global environment.
So we need to workshop the best path for us, to achieve our aspirations without having to learn from our own mistakes. So it's important that we continue to convene, have these conversations, and see how we work together for the betterment of our continent.
In March 1975, the African continent rose to its feet, and heads of state came together to realize an ideal of economic and financial solidarity, the African Solidarity Fund, ASF.
Ça fait naturellement de nous une vieille institution. En Afrique, lorsqu'on parle d'âge, ça renvoie à la sagesse, ça renvoie également à l'expérience.
The mission of this Pan-African institution is to pool the resources of member states in order to finance the continent's economic development. A veritable tool for economic and social integration. Its headquarters is based in Niamey, Niger. It is managed by a multidisciplinary team of nationals from its member states, under the leadership of Mr. Abdourahmane Diallo.
On est parti des indépendances dans les années 60, tout était à faire. Les idées économiques commençaient à germer. J'ai un bon projet. Je veux contribuer au développement de mon pays, contribuer à la création d'emplois. L'idée est bonne, c'est reconnu, mais je n'ai pas de ressources pour mettre en œuvre véritablement le projet, c'est-à-dire accès au financement. Ce qui empêchait et gênait l'accès au crédit, c'était la garantie. Parce que les banques à l'époque, les bailleurs de manière générale, avaient une perception assez spécifique du risque, surtout dans nos pays. Ils ont pensé à mettre en œuvre une institution qui pouvait offrir à ces banques des mesures d'apaisement, donc des facteurs d'atténuation du risque. Ils ont créé un fonds de garantie.
Pour se rapprocher davantage des acteurs économiques des différents pays membres, l'UFSA a déployé en 2021 une stratégie d'ouverture de missions résidentes avec l'ouverture de la première mission résidente en île Maurice en 2022, en janvier 2022. Et la deuxième mission résidente en Côte d'Ivoire en janvier 2023. Mais à l'horizon 2025, nous avons en perspective l'ouverture de deux autres missions résidentes. Une à Kigali, pour prendre en charge convenablement toute l'Afrique de l'Est, et une autre à Libreville, pour l'Afrique centrale.
The ASF, through its growing involvement and diplomatic offensive, has succeeded in mobilizing the symbolic figures of the African leadership, including the President of the African Union Commission, S.E. Moussa Mahamat Faki, the President of the African Development Bank, the Arab Bank for Economic Development of Africa State Badia, as well as several African heads of state.
Récemment, on a été admis en tant qu'observateur au niveau de l'Union africaine. Mais la finalité, c'est qu'on devienne véritablement une agence spécialisée de l'Union africaine.
Il est appelé à se faire connaître à travers ses États membres, certes, mais également à travers l'Afrique, parce que nous ambitionnons de voir l'ensemble des pays africains adhérer au fonds pour véritablement contribuer au développement économique du continent.
Avec ce qu'on est en train de faire dans le cadre de la mobilisation des ressources, certainement qu'on va devenir le fonds de garantie le mieux capitalisé d'Afrique. Actuellement, on est associé à tout ce qui se fait dans le cadre du financement du développement en Afrique, que ce soit au niveau de l'Union africaine, que ce soit avec la BAD, Africatalyst, toutes les institutions.
What do I mean by that? We have a very, very difficult challenge to address. But we are also very fortunate that the people in this room, including Ambassador Muchanga and the ambassador, are going to help us understand a few of the concepts. You're going to meet some of the panelists here, and one of the reasons we are slightly behind schedule is we're waiting for one of the honorable ministers who is supposed to address us. So please forgive us, and for those of you from the continent, you understand the essence. The ministers are coming, and they will come. But let me dial it back a few seconds, and I'm going to speak for a very short time because I'm trying to make sure that we buy for the time. Each one of the development finance institutions in this room, I'll say it again, each of the development finance institutions in this room, whether it is the Africa Solidarity Fund, whether it is the PTA Reinsurance ZEPRI, whether it is the Africa Finance Cooperation, whether it is the Afrexim Bank, whether it is the African Trade and Development Insurance, Africa Trade and Investment Development Insurance, and Shelter Afrique, each of them made a profit. And I'll say it again, each of them made a profit. But what's also very interesting is if you look at the annual reports of each of these institutions, they talk about a very, very difficult environment within which they were able to raise funds. So where are we right now? Oops. I want to tell you guys that the person I really like the most in this room is here. Fatima is here. Don't feel bad. It's because I was waiting for her. But the second person I like the most is also here. And then the third person who stood me up for a golf game is here. So I have friends. But my longest employer is also here. So I want you to know that this room is full of some of Africa's best and brightest people. And this is the perfect place for us to talk about the essence of why we're here. If anybody has chosen to come to this event, they understand that Africa is facing a very deep, dark crunch. But what's also very interesting is that very few people know that this room, the people who are sitting at these tables, have some of the world's best solutions for dealing with Africa's problems. Now, I'll be unfair if I didn't bring up something very important. In this room is somebody who has just been appointed Minister of Finance, and she is facing the typical sort of challenges that African countries face. Those are some of the questions we'll be discussing here. Thank you so much for being here. I'm also so happy to say that if I don't observe protocol, it honestly is because each of the people that I don't observe protocol on have treated me like a brother, a son. So if I call them by their first name, please forgive me for that. But they are technically all honorable, doctor, Mr., undersecretary, and all those things. So let's come to the heart of the matter. The role of African multilateral financial institutions in catalyzing sustainable economic development in Africa. That is going to be our overall discussion. I am bringing up these things again because we have the honorable ministers. I think we only have Chad. Okay, fine. We are going to officially and gently move into the program. But I want to say our panelists are going to be, and I'm starting with the panelists, but I'll then come up to the people who are going to be able to give speeches. The panelists is Hope Murera, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the PTA Reassurance Company, ZEPRI. I am hoping that she introduces herself in the context, but the context within which I know Hope is she paid for the first time I got onto a flight to go into ZEPRI. This is 2003, 2002. If you go back to 2002, 2003, ZEPRI was a profitable institution. Let's then come to the other person. It's Abdurrahman Diallo, Managing Director of the African Solidarity Fund. Monsieur Diallo, bienvenue. My first conversation with a French person. And then we have somebody else called Mr. Dennis Denya, who is the Senior Executive Vice President of the Afrexim Bank. Dennis is very important under the circumstances for two simple reasons. The sheer amount of work that the Afrexim Bank is doing right now when it comes to promoting the African Continental Free Trade Area and the agreement and the different financial institutions. And that's when I'm also going to bring up the other aspects of people from the African Union. They will be able to speak on behalf of the AFCFTA Secretariat. So to her, one of the first questions I'll say, Madame Asil Tukone, Etats-Unis prop, very well. Because of those things, we're going to be discussing some of the elements that you're challenged with and how you deal with this. So now that we don't have the ministers here, it gives me, how shall I say it? It gives me great pleasure to welcome a sister, a person who is acting on a very, very high level, energetic level, to give us her opening remarks, Her Excellency Hilda Suka Mafudze, the African Union's ambassador to the United States of America. Ma'am, your floor. Thank you very much. Oh, please keep it going until she gets here.
Okay.
I should have given her the way into her own home.
Thank you, my brother.
She has arrived.
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon and a very big welcome to you all. Your Excellency, Ambassador Albert M. Changa, Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Tourism, Industry and Minerals, African Union Commission. Mrs. Samaila Subairu, President and CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation, and the first Vice Chairperson of the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, the Africa Club. Excellencies, ministers present, Honorable Central Bank Governors, Honorable heads of the African Multilateral Financial Institutions, distinguished representatives of international organizations, distinguished representatives of Pan-African institutions, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this important event. aimed at exploring the critical role of the African multilateral financial institutions shaping the trajectory of Africa, the economic trajectory of Africa. This meeting comes at a crucial time as Africa navigates unprecedented global challenges while also harnessing the immense opportunities that lie before us. Excellencies and gentlemen, there has been consensus in the continent on the need for robust financial systems and the institutions to drive our collective aspirations for sustainable development as outlined in our economic blueprint, Agenda 2063. As we strive to realize the Africa we want, the African multilateral financial institutions stand at the forefront of efforts to mobilize resources, foster financial inclusion, and support resilient economies across the continent. Today, we are tasked with addressing both the opportunities and the challenges faced by these institutions. We must acknowledge that achievements in thriving key development projects, fostering regional integration, and advancing critical infrastructure across sectors such as energy, agriculture, and energy, and technology. However, we are equally mindful of the barriers that still hinder their full potential issues of capitalization and harmonization of regional frameworks among them. In the face of global economic uncertainties, climate change, geopolitical tensions, and the digital transformation of our societies, African multilateral financial institutions must be agile, innovative, and inclusive. They must embrace a new partnership, leveraging digital finance and a secure alternative sources of funding to meet the diverse needs of our growing economies. This event offers an invaluable platform to reflect on these realities and chart a way forward. We look forward to your insights on how we can strengthen our African multilateral financial institutions to not only meet the urgent demands of today, but to build a future where African nations can thrive. Let me conclude by emphasizing that we have the opportunity to reinforce the pillars of inclusive growth and sustainable development and advance a more equitable and prosperous Africa for generations to come. In the same token, I would like to suggest that we initiate more activities in Washington, D.C. or elsewhere with Afrexim Bank and stakeholders in key sectors of mutual interest to continue the dialogue and enhance partnerships. I thank you very much for listening, and I welcome you all to Africa House. Thank you, my brother.
Now that our host has spoken, I'm going to be very tough on the next speakers. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our highest ranking civil servant in this room, Ambassador Albert Muchanga. Ambassador Muchanga, I'm going to be a bully. I'm going to give you less than 3.5 minutes to speak, simply because you are amongst your friends. It will be the same thing with the next person. But of course, you know very well 3.5 means 7. Thank you.
On the salutations of our ambassador who is going out to There's a lever. Sorry, I think I did not switch on because you said you are going to be strict with me. When I speak of the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, for me, I see it as a lever which is going to contribute to the development of a Pan-African capital market. And in so doing, you need to work with the African Stock Exchanges Association so that those countries which do not have stock exchanges, you assist in establishing those stock exchanges. Because right now, we've got a virtual platform of the African Stock Exchange Association. Point number one. Point number two, the African Export-Import Bank has started work on Africa direct investment. We need to promote investments across Africa from the wealthy Africans. And the reality on the ground now, and I urge all of you to Google the Africa Wealth Report 2024. It's going to show you that right now, 135,200 Africans have got investable wealth of $2.5 trillion. That's not little money. My sister, if you can switch off them. Where is it coming? Don't add that to my 3 minutes. This is, okay, take this one. Yes. Yes. So that's a lot of money. What's the problem? Am I too close? But that, oh, we have a serious problem.
You have another minute. It's okay.
Yes, that money right now is lying idle. The owners of that money say they cannot invest because the conditions are not appropriate. And I already gave it to the chairperson of AAMFI, Professor Oram. The task you have as the financial institutions is to reach out to those wealthy Africans and let them meet the African Union heads of state and government so that there is a candid discussion, very frank discussion about what needs to be done to unlock those resources. So when you've done that, you've contributed to the development of an African capital market. Number three, we have on the ground work to establish or operationalize the African Credit Rating Agency. It's going to be private sector driven. Again, your task is to start talking to the private sector of Africa to say, we've given you this platform, make use of it. And there are a number of activities where you can also assist. You work with the emerging African credit rating agents to ensure that those Africans which are currently not rated, they undergo annual ratings on a periodic basis. You work with them to promote independence of the central banks where they are not very strong. You work with them to promote human capital development. You've got very good capital market analysts in your institutions. So when the rating agencies come to rate you, on a professional basis, you can argue with them. Agree and disagree to say professionally you are wrong. Most of our governments, they take those reports at face value. They don't have the capacities to analyze them. Let's develop that human capital. Then you also have a task to work with in collecting statistics across Africa so that we've got timely statistics. That's another lever where we can contribute to the development of the African capital market. Now, as you do so, there's going to be huge financing required. In February this year, we're going to roll out the strategic framework of inclusive growth and sustainable development. Just two key issues. One, to position African countries to grow at 7 to 10% over the period of 40 to 50 years. And two, raise investment levels from 20% of GDP to 40%. And that's where your money comes in. And another key document is the readiness towards the readiness assessment towards an African continental, an African customs union / common market. It's very dangerous for us to remain at the level of the African continental free trade for a long time. Why? Because we don't have a common external tariff. And if we continue that way, there's the danger of transshipment undermining Africa's industrialization. But when we have a customs union, we've got a common external tariff. And then when that is done, there's a bigger market for trading goods and services. And finance is one of the key priority areas in our economic integration agenda. Again, you have a role to play. So these are my opening remarks. Have I gone beyond? No. I'm not going to go beyond that minute, but I join my sister here in saying, you're welcome here. This is your house. Let us continue the candid discussion and build on what we've done in the past. Thank you very much.
Technology seems to be a challenge. Okay. So again, once more, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all and welcome to this AAMFI event. I don't need to introduce AAMFI. We're just the Association of African Multilateral Financial Institutions that are trying to find a way to catalyze development and stabilize African economies. It's very important that we have that joint role because most of the conversations in Africa is really around stabilization as opposed to growth. And we know that we need growth. We need growth because our biggest challenge is job creation. We have young growing population and we need to find them jobs. Finding them jobs is very important because that's the only way they become a dividend for us as opposed to tools for chaos in our societies. So it's very important that we find ways and are focused on creating more jobs in Africa. We're also focused on how to reduce poverty and income inequality, or inequality in general. That's one of the key objectives that we have, and that can only happen through development. I say this because I see that the main objective of today's conversation is how we can catalyze sustainable economic development. And for us in Africa, sustainable economic development is about jobs. You know, it's about how we create quality jobs. It's about how we capture and retain more value from our resources in a way that the jobs that we create can be sustainable and we can have sustainable growth within our economies. And one of the things that we need to do, like I've always said, is to own our development. We need to take ownership of our development, and we need to fund our development. Ambassador Mshanga talked about stock exchanges, very, very important. But stock exchanges are built on institutional savings. You know, so we need to focus on how to catalyze and deploy institutional savings within Africa. We know that we have varying statistics about the amount of institutional savings that we have on the continent. What is important is how do we get them to work. And for me, I think one of the key objectives that we have at the AAMFI is how can we have a dialogue with Africans, African governments, and African institutional investors on contributing more to the development of our economies. And by that we mean, how can we have a framework where African governments, African central banks understand the importance of building African institutions. So we need to have a program that is deliberate and intentional, whereby we capitalize African banks. Once we capitalize African banks, we also need to capitalize African development finance institutions and African multilateral financial institutions. We also need to find ways whereby we can create credit enhancement or risk mitigation tools that allow for pension funds and insurance companies to participate in the economies. So we need to be thinking of how can we create the tools that will allow for pension funds to invest in infrastructure, to invest in industrialization, and invest in economic growth across Africa. We have a couple of initiatives that we have done that have worked. So for example, in Nigeria, we have the Infrastructure Credit Organization called InfraCredit, which is a joint venture between the Sovereign Wealth Fund and ourselves and other investors across the globe in providing credit guarantees for pension funds and insurance companies to invest in infrastructure. That's a program that needs to be replicated at scale across the continent. Why? Because we have pension savings that are looking for long-term assets to match the long-term liabilities that they are, and infrastructural industrialization are those assets. So we need to find a way to make that happen. It is when we make that happen that we would find the savings that will go to the stock exchanges and capital markets that we need. We need to be able to capture and retain more value from our goods so that we can have goods to trade within the African Continental Free Trade Area. We can't just be talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area without the stock of African goods to be traded within the Continental Free Trade Area. I see Honorable Fatima Haram Asil here. We have an industrial park in Chad that's already trading within Africa. It's already exporting to Cameroon, to Gabon, and Angola. And that is something that can be replicated at scale. We've recently had the Afrexim Bank join us in Arise IIP. We welcome all other multilaterals to join us, so that we're on that journey together of creating the African institutions that would propel growth and development on the continent. So just to summarize, I welcome you all here again today for an important dialogue on how we should take ownership and finance our development. So if you remember something from this session, is that Africans must take ownership of our economic development, and we must finance it by ourselves. Why? So all of us in AAMFI, our capital is just $60 billion. And that is nothing compared to the scale of opportunity and the financing requirements on the continent. So we need to move from where we are today and scale up. And we need to collectively as AAMFI also not be thinking of just how much we can deploy into projects, but how much we can mobilize into projects. So the professor just mentioned about how we use our credit rating to mobilize investment. It's something that we can all do together. So recently we worked together, again with some of our colleagues here to raise 1.5 billion euros for a development bank in Nigeria. And that's by providing our credit guarantee to the market to reduce their interest rate and increase the amount of money that is available to them. So initiatives like that are things that we will continue to do at AAMFI to find ways of deploying capital, not just from our balance sheets, but from across the universe. We also have a lot of projects that we're involved in as lead developers. We're currently working on the Lobito corridor, which is building a rail link of 800 kilometers between northwest Zambia into Luakano in Angola. We're also advising on the rehabilitation of the Lobito Atlantic Rail from DRC to the port of Lobito in Angola. These are all important infrastructure projects that would integrate the continent, that would provide corridors for growth in industry, agricultural value chain, and even tourism. So these are opportunities for us to work together collaboratively to ensure that we can deliver for our people. Thank you all for your time.
The next part is quite interesting, but before I seg into the next interesting part, I need to say two simple things. One, a very important person has to sneak up for a meeting, so I'm just going to ask her to come up here and give her speech. Madam, I know you have a 3 o'clock meeting to go to, and I'm going to ask you to come up here to answer two simple questions. But I also wanted to recognize the Acting Secretary General of this great organization, my friend Babajide. Babajide, please give him a round of applause. He has refused to give us a speech at the beginning. He'll give us a speech towards the end. But I am going to request Her Excellency Haram Fatima Seal, the Minister of Finance in the Republic of Chad. And these are the questions I'm going to ask for the moment, and this is what I'd like you to answer for the time that you have to speak. The first question is, given the challenges Africa faces in attracting consistent foreign direct investment, can you please elaborate on any innovative fiscal policies or regulatory reforms that you in Chad or the government of Chad is implementing to make it easier for multilateral finance institutions to do business with your countries? And based on that, I also have a follow-up question specifically on Chad. What has Chad's experience been with multilateral development financial institutions? In other words, what specific programs do you think you can add and can be added to your system? So thank you very much, Madam. I would like for you to come to the table and address the audience. Thank you so much. That's before. Oh, can we see, Madam, can we see if she can use her microphone right there in case? Let's hope it works. Okay, Madam, I'm sorry, but you have to come up here. Thank you. So we almost have to remind her to keep her finger on the pulse. Thank you.
hold it. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Program Director, Mr. Dennis. Good afternoon to all of you, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, and everybody else. It's actually so great to be here in Africa's House. And thank you to Babajide and also all the organizers for inviting me to this important event. I don't have a speech per se, but actually I have been asked questions. I think if the question is what type of innovative reform that Chad is doing. I just want to correct one thing. Actually, I'm in charge of economic and planning, so not finance. So that should be really stated. For Chad has a strategy, has developed a strategy in August of 2022. And this strategy is actually for public finance reform. It's going from 2022 to 2027. And on these strategies, our goal is, that Chad is a petroleum country, and our goal is to make sure that we increase the non-oil, revenues. Of course, IMF is talking about that and the whole world, and actually, we know that something needs to be done. So the first thing we have done is, with the help and support of Rwanda Cooperation, we have implemented the e-tax for the tax administration. With the support, technical support of ANTAD, we have implemented Sidonia Ward for the custom revenue. We have today e-registration and e-conservation for land management. We're working on several other, including the e-procurement, just to make sure that there is transparency, and also we want to make sure that also things are moving fast. Today, actually, we have noticed that the non-oil revenue have increased from year to year, and this positive trend indicate a growing tax culture, and also I can say about fiscal citizenship. Today you will see Chadian actually declaring, paying even for, like the domain, they're paying their taxes and so forth. So this is something that actually very interesting. And actually this year, we actually surpassed our target. We have, like our target was 60%, increase of 60%, and we have surpassed it. So actually this is something that is very good. And recently, I think last week, we have the IMF that went to Chad, and actually they saw it as something very positive. And today we're actually talking about a program with Chad, which is kind of very important, because we're with the CEMAC region, and you know that the whole region or sub-region needs to be in program in order to see the effect. And so today Chad is moving forward, and that's something actually very good news. But we're going to continue having this reform done so that we can see more and more benefit, and then, as I said, the revenue from non-oil will increase. That's something that is important. Now, I think there is a question about the role of the African multi-financial institution. I think it's very important to say that they're very important. They play an important role for the development of the continent. I think that we have our institutions, they know our problems, and I think that we need to ensure that actually we're using them, we're talking to them so that they can improve every day. As far as Chad is concerned, we're grateful actually to these financial institutions. Here we can talk about the African Development Bank. We spoke about ARISE. This is something that is very good, and it's something that actually really close to my heart. I was in my prior life a Commissioner of Trade and Industry is something that actually passions me very much. Today, when we talk about industrial park, this is something that is very positive, and we have the Continental Free Trade Area. You cannot talk about continental free trade area without any African goods. So this is something that is very good. Industrial park is the way to go. Today, I mean, everybody's speaking about energies. We need energy in order to industrialize. But I think that for us, at least for me, something as industrial park is something very important. And then we really thank you for that. We also have, for example, another project today with the African Development Bank. Is the project role is to support economic governance in the extractive sector. So it's actually to strengthen capacity in terms of fiscal policy effectiveness and governance on the extractive sector to create favorable conditions for Chad gradual exit from its fragile situation. So this is also one of the projects that we have. So we actually see the benefit of our institutions. I think we want to work together, and that's why a forum like this one is very important, that so we can understand how we can work together and move forward with our multi-financial institution. SDGs, today, I mean, actually we're 2024, 2030 is around the corner. Of course, the SDGs, we cannot talk as an African without talking about, Agenda 2063. But the good thing is they're actually the same, synchronized in a way that we need finances to finance and to ensure that we reach the SDGs by 2030. Climate change is affecting us very, very much, I think, and everything is a priority for us. Industrialization is a priority for us, so we need to strengthen our institutions so that we can finance our development. So it is, for me, actually, this is something that is very important. I don't know if, I think there is another question about, how do we create an enabling environment? For us, the first thing that we do is our president has been elected in May of 2024. And after his election, we have a societal project, which is actually, we will look at the project of the president. And then we also look at Agenda 2063, of course, and then the SDGs to ensure what are the discrepancies, if any. And actually, in the situation of our population, but actually, they're reconciled very, very much. And now we're actually working on preparing a national development plan. With this national development plan, we want to include all the partners to work with us to ensure that actually is shared, because for us it's kind of preparing a round table from now, from the preparation to the round table, because this is not something that you get up in one day and then say that we're going to have a round table. So we want to work with the partners to have projects, bankable projects, so that we can move forward. So these bankable projects, once we have them, we have for investment, we have agencies for investment and export. Its mandate is actually to create an enabling environment that meets international standing, promote investment and export, support the development of SME. So we have this agency. We have today a national investment charter that allow full permit for foreign ownership of companies. We have tax breaks, and especially with industrialization, we have more tax breaks, because for us, anything that creates more job, economic development is something that we encourage very much, and something that we also need transfer of skills so that our people can be equipped tomorrow to transform our economies. So all this taking into factors when we talk about tax breaks and so forth. Of course, when you talk about an enabling environment, you always have to talk about justice. You want to make sure that your justice is correct, so that when people come to invest, they're investing in a proper country where that if there is any issue, legal issues, things will be solved on a proper manner. So actually, we are looking forward to attracting people to Chad, looking forward to work with the multinational banks, our banks, to finance our developments. And of course, because I have been nominated, I think, in by the the end of May. We're reviewing our portfolios to ensure that how we can make work together better with our banks. What are some things that we can change from our side or from the bank side, so that we can implement projects that can change the life of our people. The last thing is that actually, as a government, we need to also make sure that we can advocate to our banks wherever it needs to be, so that they can get the resources to help us in return. So this is actually something that is also very important. We also need to do our share part to support our banks so that they can help us better. Review our portfolios, having constructive criticism, so that things are moving forward for our people. Today, the Continental Free Trade Area, the industrialization, IDA, the mining, all these, that have been approved by our head of state and government, we need to finance them, we need to be practical, and we need to move forward. So I want to thank you, and I will stop there. Thanks.
Right after that, and I'm so happy that we're not focusing on protocol here today, but right after that, it gives me such great pleasure to welcome Hope Murera, Managing Director and CEO at ZEPRI PTA Reassurance, to come and join us at the panel. This is your spot. The next person is Abdurrahman Diallo, Managing Director of the African Solidarity Fund. Please, you're welcome over here. And of course, last but not least, I have Mr. Dennis Denya, Senior Executive Vice President, Finance, Administration, and Banking Services at Afrexim Bank, coming off to the panel right here. So, I just wanted to say that one of our biggest challenges is going to be the microphones, but I'm hoping that we can share the microphones in between. It will be an opportunity for us to speak to the various people. Let me quickly go to the first question, which is going to go to the Honorable Nabe from the government of Guinea. The first question I have for you, sir, is almost like what Honorable Asil had to answer. It's, given the challenges Africa faces in attracting consistent foreign direct investment, could you please elaborate on any innovative fiscal policies or regulatory reforms you're implementing to make it easier for multilateral financial institutions, basically the people on the panel with you, to basically do business in your countries? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, dear co-panelists. Ismail Nabig from Guinea, Republic of Guinea, because you are few Guinea, but just by Guinea-Conakry, but the Republic of Guinea. So as you rightly said, Guinea, as you know, is a country in West Africa. I always like to say that Guinea, we are more West African because one of the, can you hear me? Is that okay? Okay. Guinea has been embarking the last 3 years. We've been very much, going through what we call a refundation, try to recapitalize the country, not only on the economic point, but the first is a social pillar that the government is embarking to transform the social landscape of the country. and the second is economic, and the third is politics. So what has been attracting, therefore, to making sure the most important is fighting against corruption. And then our friend from Multinational, I think this is the place to congratulate them, what they have been doing, be it African Development Bank, Afri-Exim Bank, and all the fund. You know, I also see ITD here. So they've been working for our economy to be resilient, to be, because we need to do things for ourselves. Because as someone said, in our part of the world, in Guinea, everything is a priority. I like to say all the time, when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. So basically, everything is has to do in our part of the world. There's no water, there's no electricity, and so on and so forth. So what we've been doing there for the last 3 years, we are very clear. The vision of the head of state is very clear. That's why we don't want to go for any planification for 5 years or 10 years moving forward. We are developing 15 years plan right now. So my ministry in charge of planning and other ministry, we are developing a 15 years development plan, which is also a sustainable plan, because talk about environment. So this is something we've been advocating. And at the same time, Guinea, as you may know, we've been developing a project, a landscape project, which is Simandu project. The Simandu project is one of the biggest projects right now. It's a mining project, but we are using this mining project to develop the country. It's in 3 phases. The first is a developing of the mine itself. What I mean mine is iron ore mine. At the same time, we are building 650-kilometer railway, and then also develop a deep port. The railway and the deep port, they are already 50% execution. We didn't talk about it. I think we've been in the closed door. People didn't know about what exactly is happening. But the project today is embarking and is developing the country, and also our growth, our inflation. We had just IMF last week in Guinea. Our inflation has gone down. The growth has gone up about 6.1%. This is very moderate, but we hope it can go much more larger. So we are using the mine in order to develop the country. We need to learn from what has been done in the past. And then in IMF, World Bank, it's good they can come and work with us, because they will give us what we call the stamp between our development. In the program we are developing for 15 years program, is not, the mine is one of the components of the program. The second component of the program is Guinea gonna develop its own sovereign wealth fund, because the mine gonna generate revenues. If you don't catalyze now, the revenue gonna go to all the expenses not thought good for the country. The third is also rating. Our economy is not rated. I'm very pleased that the African Union or the African Development Bank, we need to our own rating. And then the Guinea wanna now moving forward to go for a credit rating of our economy. So to give you a summary to all this, we are developing one program, which is a program that the president himself said he want to make sure the program will resist to the time and for the people. And this program is a 5-pillar. It's covering all the areas. The first pillar is agro-industry, commerce. And the second, because when you talk about today, Guinea want to do agriculture. We said we have a 13 million hectare of Arab land. But when you want 10,000 Arab, you can't find it, because it's not, you can't find it. You have to make sure that the Minister of Agriculture and other ministry need to work now to do aménagement. They have to try to make sure to aménage all these areas. When you come as an investor, you will have all the elements in front of you. The commerce, the African Free Trade Zone, yes, we talk about it. We don't have industries. End of the day, we talk about free. If Nigeria is producing, we're going to be sending to Guinea. If there's no industry in Guinea, what Guinea can sell to Nigeria? So we need to develop in the next 15 years a robust commerce. The second pillar is called education and culture. We need to make sure that to train young people. We need to it's good to have buildings and all that, but you have to plan now. In the next 15 years, how many Guineans can be graduated from TVET, from primary school, from secondary school, is extremely important. As a Guinean, we are called the mining country, but we need, in Africa, we don't have a mining university, or you don't have mining institute. We need to think now to develop the mining institute. Culture is extremely important for our culture, to know who we are and develop our culture. You go to Southeast Asia, Asia in general, the first thing is their culture. The third pillar is infrastructure, transportation and technology. Therefore, now in 2015, 2040, we want to develop about 10,000 kilometer bitumen, 10,000. We have a vision. We want to make sure we develop a certain large number of road. The port, the same time. And the fourth pillar is economy, finance, and insurance. We want to build houses today. We want to do agriculture, but you don't have a bank of, housing bank. You don't have, agriculture bank. But we will work on our friend from the multinational to set up our own bank in order to have a low rate to allow the population to have access to credit, to do agriculture, and to build their own houses. The fifth layer is about healthcare. All are linked. But our vision moving forward, not only to do a great plan and then call for round table, and then we want to make sure
jump to you, Dennis, from the African Bank. Guinea is one of your shareholders in the country, and you can hear his passion. They have a solid plan, they have pillars. So the question for you is, African Bank has championed trade and industrial financing activities of the continent, especially in the light of the AFCFTA. But it is clear that more than needs to be done. So this is the tough question for you, and you have to answer it, or we'll have to ask you more and more questions. What key actions do you recommend African countries take in order to enable African multilateral financial institutions to deliver more support to countries such as Guinea, such as Chad, and of course every other African country? In other words, are there innovative ways of capitalizing all these activities, and what has been African Bank's experience in growing their capital and capacity over the last 30 years? Now, I promise if this is a difficult question, I will bring it back and answer. But now you can actually address your needs. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, moderator. At African Bank, we are very cognizant of the fact that we can develop our continent through trade. And over the last 30 years, the bank has actually approved transactions worth over $150 billion over a 30-year period. And if you look at our results at the end of June this year, our total assets in terms of loans and advances are over $30 billion on the books right now. We look at development through the lens of trade by facilitating the financing promotion of goods and services once they are traded. But we also go behind that and look at how do we generate the goods that needs to be traded. That's why we invest in infrastructure that enables the trade. We invest in the facilities. The CEO of Africa Finance Corporation spoke about industrial zones which we are investing in as a shareholder or as a debt provider. That is to enable countries to add value to their raw materials, to produce goods that are required by the neighbors. as far as Guinea is concerned, we stand ready to provide funded solutions, non-funded solutions. We can even provide advisory services in terms of best practices that we will enable Guinea to achieve its objectives. Now, the challenges that we face as a continent are numerous. Just from a funding point of view, if you look at what the African Development Bank has estimated, the gap that is there on the trade finance is about 100 billion. On infrastructure is about 100 billion a year. As Somalia indicated, the capital of members of AAMFI is only 60 billion US dollars. Compare that to Brazil, a smaller economy. BNDS is 150 billion. If you look at China, which is the same population as Africa, China Exim Bank alone is 750 billion. Even if you add ADB on the capital that we have, it's no more than 100 billion. So we need to generate more capital for African institutions. But I must give credit to the governments of the continent. If you recall in 2019 when COVID came and African Bank stepped up in providing the funding for the vaccines, the governments actually made a commitment to provide additional capital to the bank, 2.6 billion in paid-in capital. As I speak to you now, 80% of that has been paid by the African governments, even during these times of scarcity in terms of foreign currency. So 2 billion has come into the bank. If you look at our paid-in capital, now it's above $6 billion. But as Samaila indicated, we need to ensure that African resources work for Africa. So in 2014, we looked at central banks, the monies they have in terms of reserves, where are they putting the money? Mostly they put it with the Federal Reserve here in America, and the money doesn't work for us. So we approached the central banks and said, put some of your money with us. We will use it to develop Africa. And cumulatively since 2014, we have raised 38 billion US dollars. The balance in our books as I speak to you now is 8 billion from African central banks. What that does is it enables us to then intervene in countries like Guinea at a lower cost than we would have otherwise done. Because we are using resources from the continent. But we need to do more than that. Because if you look at total reserves of the continent, it's over 500 billion US dollars. And we're just talking about 8 billion. So we do have the resources on the continent. It's how do we enable those with the resources to give us so that we can fund. And one of the ways we do that is we demonstrate the capability to utilize those resources in a risk mitigated manner. If you look at our rating, we started getting rated in 2009. We were BBB minus. We worked hard over the years. We now rated AA by Japan Credit Rating Agency, China Rating Agency, Baa1 by Moody's. That enables us to bring our rating to bear in reducing the cost of doing business on the continent. And it provides trust for the institutions that have resources to give it to us. We now have 144 institutions on the continent providing liquidity to the bank. But we can expand that so that African resources are used to finance African problems.
What's interesting is whatever Dennis just talked about is actually true. Because if you look at Afreximbank's biggest shareholder, if I'm not mistaken, is a central bank. The Central Bank of Egypt is the biggest shareholder. But related with that is the elements around trade and development and support that you give other countries. But let me pivot quickly on the elements of trade specifically to ask Paul Guerrero this question. The high transaction costs in African financial institutions are often driven by perceived risks. This is something that our brother Manuel has to deal with on a regular basis, especially when transactions What role do you see reinsurance? I know that you were talking earlier about supporting farmers and cattle keepers like you did in Kenya, providing a specific tool for them. So what specific role do you see reinsurance playing in mitigating these risks, particularly for trade, large-scale infrastructure projects? Additionally, how do we scale up these efforts to enhance impact in financial development? Basically, these questions are around the same thing. Ultimately, what has been Zachry's experience on all this?
Thank you, Dennis, and I'm proud of my fellow Yeah, but we're all grappling with the same question. Right? As Africans, so I come from Rwanda, and we have a saying that says, the neighbor's support comes after the rain, right? We all talk about francophone and francophone, but we have our languages and there's a lot of wisdom there. So it's just owning that and so the grappling of this is that most of our interventions are scattered. So even, indeed there are risks, there are perceived risks, there are real risks, right? People risks, economic and currency risks, climate risks, when we talk about the project risk as well. But the solutions can only be done if we come together. And our motivation at AAMFI is how do we, going back to your second question, how do we scale up the interventions? You did talk about African institutions mobilizing funds. We have that on our funds. Not only at AAMFI, but imagine every insurance company, every bank, every pension fund on the continent. How do we bring all this into the cycle, into the inclusion? Right? So, and therefore use that money to be able to fund the projects. And how do we make sure that those projects are de-risked by our own institutions? Because we have the capacity of the continent, right? Start with politics, Manuel will talk about it. But at the end of the day, we all give guarantees to investors to tell them it's safe, right? Two, we have the climate risks. You have mentioned the project, the flagship project, right? That they're de-risking pastures in the Horn of Africa to allow investment into that economy that is very fragile. Insurance is an issue as that. When we talk about infrastructure projects in the continent, we're involved in most of it in terms of how do we provide for the bonds, the guarantees to allow funding to flow. How do we make sure that we cover the projects, the construction projects, what we call all the construction projects, risks that will come through. Those are insurance covered, we are covering. But we see that because it is not at a very organized and aggregated level, we are then not able to cover, as a continent, most of our big risks. If I talk about the standard gauge barrier, it was a big negotiation, perhaps 40% stakeholder. You find that today it's still, it's our money, borrowed or not, it's our money, but it's still going on. So we are therefore not involved in our own institutions. We are not mobilizing the covers, because if we did syndication that the banks do, as insurance companies on the continent, we can cover most of our risks. We have the capacity, but you find regulatory issues. You have capital in Kenya, it can be deployed in Tanzania or Zambia. So insurance does play a big role. It is the last mile, as we call it, in terms of, can we help you?
I'm trying to bring that one.
Bring back?
That's
for you. Right, so in answering the questions, insurance, reinsurance play a big role. One, or the first part is the funds, because we are mobilizers of funds, right? All insurance, reinsurance companies mobilize funds. So we plow this into the economy, into the banks to fund infrastructure. But also brought together, we are able now to cover large risks. So at the end of the day, the political goodwill is very important. Even as we cover the political risks, climate risks is something that I talk about on this agenda, and looking at the project we run at a regional level, it means that every time we want to make something work, it has to be at scale, it has to be at region, it has to be at. So the same does apply. Every done that successfully over the years. We were rated one of the well-rated AAA by GCR and AAA by AAMFI. But we found that insurance penetration is still at 2%. So at the end of the day, how do we move that needle? And that is, for me, my motivation in joining up. That unless we come together to create those solutions, to fund those projects, to de-risk those projects through insurance, then as a continent, we never be able to move any of the agendas that we'll never be able to achieve the African 63. So very critical. It's part of the financing tools. It's been maybe not always understood, but it's globally used. De-risk financing. We do that in affordable housing, Minister. Very happy to hear that. We provide guarantees for loans to affordable housing. We de-risk farmers to borrow from banks. We de-risk infrastructure, but it will only make an impact if we're doing it at a larger scale by regulating.
How does it, enhance? How does it enhance the overall aspects of lowering financial costs for project?
Et très simplement, on a recours à l'endettement. Il faut lever des ressources pour pouvoir y aller. Lever des ressources internes, lorsque la confiance existe en interne, vous n'êtes pas sans savoir. Je ressors tout à l'heure d'un entretien avec un banquier qui était en train de structurer pour lever des ressources. Dans un pays qui a du mal à souhaiter. À l'international, c'est pareil, se pose le problème de la perception du risque dans nos pays. Le projet, il est bon. De manière intrinsèque, vous l'évaluez, il n'y a aucun souci. D'accord? Mais il est dans un contexte. Il y a le risque pays. On a forcément envie d'être remboursé. Selon la perception du banquier, on y va ou on n'y va pas.
Like his money to be refunded.
Intervient le garant. l'assureur.
Where the guarantor steps in to appease the person that is funding, and it's very important.
Celui qui assure, c'est celui qui porte véritablement le risque. C'est-à-dire que lorsqu'on analyse le projet, au-delà du porteur du projet, on s'intéresse également au garant de la qualité de sa signature. C'est pour cela qu'on se réjouit du fait que pratiquement tous les fonds de garantie actifs en Afrique se font noter et disposent même de bonnes notes. Et les fonds multilatéraux en général disposent même de notes qui sont au-dessus des notes des pays membres. Ce qui est mais véritablement un avantage incommensurable, d'autant plus que si vous avez une institution qui transcende les États, c'est-à-dire qui dispose d'une bonne note, vous le dotez en capacité, c'est-à-dire que vous le renforcez en fonds propres. Les fonds peuvent vous permettre de mobiliser plus de fonds que l'investissement que vous y mettez. Je donne un exemple très simple. Vous m'en donnez $1, je peux vous aider à mobiliser $12,5. Très simplement, en termes de capacité. Mais pour ce faire, il faut que, effectivement, on est conscient du fait que nos États disposent de peu de moyens. J'ai entendu quelqu'un le dire tout à l'heure. Tout est prioritaire dans nos pays. Et il faut un effort ou au moins trouver des mécanismes pour pouvoir abonder ces fonds en capacité pour leur permettre véritablement de pouvoir jouer leur rôle. Et je pense que c'est fondamental, c'est déterminant. Ce qui se passe habituellement, c'est que dans nos pays, les gens, ils essaient de mobiliser en interne, ils se rendent compte que ce n'est pas suffisant, ils vont à l'international, lever des fonds sur les marchés internationaux. Et ils reviennent avec des taux d'intérêt, mais véritablement très élevés, compte tenu de leur rating, du niveau de leur notation. Et ça s'explique. Parce que le taux d'intérêt, il rémunère le niveau du risque. Oui, mais ce risque, il faut chercher à le mitiger. Il faut le mitiger par une garantie, une bonne signature. C'est ce qu'on s'évertue à faire au quotidien. C'est-à-dire pouvoir véritablement jouer le rôle qui est le nôtre, parfois en contournant, compte tenu des ressources limitées de nos États, essayer de trouver des mécanismes pour leur permettre de véritablement libérer leur contribution au niveau des fonds. Je pense que c'est fondamental. C'est-à-dire on peut aller sur le marché, on y va seul ou on y va accompagné, ça veut dire couvert par une institution qui dispose d'une bonne signature, d'une bonne notation financière. Ça agit sur le taux d'intérêt et ça agit également sur la durée, bien entendu, sur le taux d'intérêt, sur la durée et sur la capacité de l'organisation ou du pays à lever des ressources. Oui, on a une mauvaise notation financière, on se fait couvrir par une institution multilatérale qui transcende les pays, qui dispose d'une bonne notation financière et qui est bien capitalisé. Et j'insiste là-dessus. Voilà.
What he's saying, I think there are two main aspects. I think it's the element on risk. But it gives me a chance to ask from the floor around many of the things that Dennis, that Abdurrahman, that Mr. Nabe, Honorable Nabe and Hope have been talking about in terms of your interventions as a multilateral guarantee agency for Africa. What are some of the comments that you would make in terms of pushing this message on Africa's development forward, leveraging multilateral investments, guarantees of multilateral financial institutions?
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Matanda, and again, excellent interventions by the Honorable Minister Nabe and the other fellow panelists. I am excited to hear that the energy that we have here as institutions and as countries to see how we can mobilize resources. I echo the comments from my brother Diallo here, where he said one way of mobilizing resources is to use guarantors or insurance. In our world, for every dollar that you invest with us, we can mobilize, in his case, $12, in our case, $15, $16. So, balance sheet to unlock more resources for the country so that the country can do more with less. And this is very, very important because, as you know, the needs are huge. Yeah, not by Mr. Dennis, the other Dennis, that even if we add all our balance sheets compared to the needs, we are still tiny. So we have to be innovative and see how we can use guarantees and insurance to mobilize resources. This is one solution that we are using, FS using, Afreximbank uses, ZEPRI is using as a way to try and bridge this gap. Otherwise, we would take forever to develop our continent. So risk perception is another point that I think has been mentioned here. The perception of risk and the reality of risk is different. We cannot fight that fight. We just have to say, how can we use our ratings, because we are highly rated, use our ratings to mobilize resources from those people who think Africa is risky. If indeed Africa was risky, you did mention, Mr. Moderator, that all of us are making money, so therefore, and we are taking risk in the continent. So that means the perception is more than the reality. But we cannot fight that perception. We just have to, continue to give our names to investors so that they can come into Africa, and one day they will not need us, and then we have succeeded. If we are no longer needed by these investors, then we've succeeded. But for now, we have a relevant role. We are ready to deploy our balance sheets, our capital, to attract investments. Otherwise, we cannot catalyze the sustainable investment. The last point I would like to make is that African institutions, or us as Africans in this room, need to own our own development. So strong African financial institutions are necessary to take the lead. Then others can come and join us. I think Director Hope has already mentioned that there's no way you can expect someone else to come and help you. You must lead, then they can come and help. So we have to do it for our own sake, for our own children's sake.
Thank you so much. I think as principals of the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, AAMFI, we should have welcomed you guys first. Really apologies for that. I think there's some protocol that were missed there. But it's a pleasure to be here. I think it's probably our second or third engagement since we launched this Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions. on the sidelines of the 37th African Union Heads of State Summit in Addis Ababa last February. So it's really key to really mention the reasons why we actually went ahead. Started with 7 of us, maybe today we 8 or 9, I think, with FSI that joined us recently. You know, the main motive is that capital is the name of the game, right? If we don't have strong capital as African institutions, would always rely on foreign capital. And foreign capital is expensive. It's not cheap. Having worked in some of those multilateral institutions or Wall Street firms, we know that for capital to leave a developed country to go into emerging market or less developed markets, you really need to justify that in your headquarters in New York, where I used to work, or Washington here, or Singapore, wherever else this capital is coming from. So for us, it was key as African multilaterals to really make sure that our capital is strong enough. My brothers and my sister on the stage mentioned basically the fact that African multilaterals altogether don't make more than $60 billion in assets, okay? We're talking about $60 billion in assets that they can invest potentially. Now, mind you, in my only sector, which is urban and housing development across Africa, we have a deficit of 52 million houses, right? 52 million units deficit across the continent. So if you are conservative, you say, okay, the cost of a home is $20,000, which is really conservative, right? $20,000. Just do the simple math. You need more than $1 trillion, okay? $1 trillion in French, 1000 milliards de dollars, okay? That you need. So it just tells you, just for one particular sector where we have a huge deficit, you have that capital need, right, to finance the sector. Now, you have a multiplier effect when you invest in such sector, right? Because you're talking about number of jobs that will be created in the value chain while closing the housing gap. And you're talking about construction materials that are needed as inputs to build those homes. You're talking about construction companies that will be created that need to develop. You know, don't go too far. We're here in America, all right? In the 30s, when you had the Great Depression, what did Franklin Delano Roosevelt did with the New Deal? The New Deal in America basically meant that the American dream was to own a home. And owning a home was a way for them to kickstart the economy when the Great Depression hit in this economy. So it's ready to say that the housing sector, urban development is key. Everybody needs a decent, proper homes to live in. And while you're doing that, you're developing the full value chain. And since we have great colleagues and ministers, panelists on stage, I think it's an opportunity to also mention this regional integration, which is really key, right? Just looking at this particular sector as an example, and this can be applied to any other sector. My brother from my own mother country, Guinea, my good friend Ismail, Guinea is one of the largest producer of bauxite. And you all know bauxite is the ore for aluminum. And aluminum is needed in many industries, especially in our sector in construction. So if you can, generate the inputs from Guinea to transform this bauxite into aluminum and then use it in the construction value chain, maybe you leverage some of the countries that have high energy, right, that can help this transformation process, then you're really using local manufactured products, right, to drive your economies. And I just spoke about 52 million housing deficits, and this is growing every single year. Now, forget about housing. Talk about automobiles or other industries where this material is needed. Iron ore, one of the largest, I think Mr. Minister mentioned the Simandu project, which is more than $20 billion project. I mean, it's the largest known iron ore project in the world today, right? So with that iron ore, you can develop your steel manufacturing industry. And steel is needed in our industry, in auto, across the board. So these are the kind of thinking that we should be having as Africans, and we have the pipeline to develop such projects, okay? And also lastly, I want to talk about local currency. You know, we do have local pension funds. We have a lot of liquidity. This liquidity to really finance our economies and our industries. So for us at Shelter Africa Development Bank, this is exactly what we do. And we did, you mentioned it, in 2022 in Nigeria, we issued 46 billion nairas in the local capital market on our balance sheet. Okay, and this is out of a 200 billion naira program to finance housing and urban development in Nigeria. And we're about to do this, by the way, this week, if you guys are around. We're supposed to sign an agreement with the West African Stock Exchange to help them develop the housing finance capital markets product in Cote d'Ivoire, BRVM. So we'll be signing that this week, because for us, capital market is key in developing the housing sector. And housing sector is also key in developing capital markets in the different countries. So we're looking to do more of those issuances in the different countries and finance the local economies with local currency. We cannot just depend on foreign investment and foreign currency. So this is how we looking to do this. And Nigeria is one example. We've done it in Kenya, where we are based as well. And even in the CFA zone in the past, we've done it, and we're about to do it again. So just in a nutshell, capital markets development, regional integration, local currency, and all of this would drive job creation and economic growth in our countries.
I just wanted to say that we have somebody on Zoom. His name is Jean-Paul Adam from the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa at the United Nations. While we wait for him, I wanted to quickly jump to my colleagues. In 30 seconds or so, what would you say in terms of strengthening African institutions through various means, including increasing capital? What would you say is going to be your target over the next year, over the next 6 months? Dennis, very quickly, go first.
Sorry, you mean target in terms of?
Yeah, what are you going to do? One of the innovative things that you're going to do to increase your capital?
I think for Afrexim Bank is to create special purpose vehicles that are targeted so that you can bring in investors who have appetite for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You hope things that you're going to be doing?
So we've already, I don't know, it's going to work. Can you hear me? Yeah. Right, so we've already started looking at diverse papers for capital. We already signed. So those are the kind of things we're looking into.
I was actually hoping that we would have the Zoom on the screen. Right now, we can say that Jean-Paul Adam, please go ahead. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us. We are going to just give you a few minutes to make your speech, and thank you so much for joining us. You have the floor, sir.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be able to join, even if virtually, even if I could not be with you at Africa House in Washington. And I'm joining on behalf of the Undersecretary General and Special Advisor on Africa, Christina Duarte, who unfortunately could not be with you. And I'll just share maybe a few brief perspectives. Unfortunately, the connection meant that I was a little bit in and out. I did not necessarily follow all of the points that have been made by the fantastic panelists. but I'd like to touch on a few issues and respond to a few as well. Firstly, one of the main issues that the Secretary General of the United Nations has underlined and our office has attempted to showcase is there are actually already a large amount of resources that are on the African continent, but they are not mobilized. In fact, the estimation is about 500 to 600 billion US dollars per year leave the continent without being appropriately mobilized. And this is a mix of, for example, illicit financial flows, in many cases also loopholes in taxation systems, in some cases inefficient use of subsidies, as well as inefficiencies as well in terms of debt repayments. And a few people have mentioned, for example, the currency challenge, and work by the African Development Bank has shown that about 50% of the additional cost of debt servicing between 2013 and 2020 was actually driven by adverse currency situations. So you have this large amount of flow of funds outside of the continent that leave the continent. And the key question is, how do we mobilize those funds? The first action that is within the power of governments is to improve domestic resource mobilization. We tend to assume that this means taxation. It is beyond taxation. It's about having the appropriate frameworks for mobilizing all of the potential assets that are available within a country and then deploying them towards the defined goal. And I was very interested to hear of the strategies followed by Chad, by my sister Fatima, where there has been a lot of effort, not only in mobilizing resources, but in also in defining the areas of priority for diversification of the economy. And I think one of the key issues in Africa is the move away from an extractive economic base towards an economic base that is prioritizing value addition and where there are value chains. And the problem in Africa is not necessarily unemployment. The problem is the informality of job opportunities. And the solution will be to create job opportunities and also entrepreneurial opportunities across the continent, which are linked to the massive amount of investment that is required in these transformative sectors, notably around infrastructure, and as well as tapping into the opportunities of digital transformation. So one of the main actions that governments can do is focus efforts on domestic resource mobilization, not just around taxation, but about deploying domestic resources towards the stated goal, whether it be Agenda 2063, national development plans, or the Sustainable Development Goals, and identifying the flows of finance that go towards that, whether it be revenues from government, as well as, for example, debt instruments. The second aspect that I will focus on is the need for urgent de-risking to bring in the private sector. And I think this was very well mentioned by the African Finance Corporation, because in all the history of investment that has been successful, and we can look just, for example, towards the European Union, when you had the massive expansion of the European Union, the successful infrastructure that was channeled to the investment that was channeled into Eastern Europe was driven by massive de-risking programs that allowed a flow of capital, which then paved the way for, at some point, then no longer requiring those de-risking instruments such as guarantees or additional insurance, because the path was paved and proven to be successful. And I think this will be especially critical on the African continent in the energy sectors, in large infrastructure projects, but also to focus on other drivers of growth, such as the agricultural sector and food systems, which will be key as well for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And the third and final point is the role of banking institutions across the continent. And that includes, of course, the multilateral development banks, such as the African Development Bank, the role that they play in deploying low-cost capital to governments, but also in financing for the development of domestic capital markets, the role of governments themselves working with domestic banks, ensuring that flows of finance are going to those areas that are required, the areas of priority, agricultural systems, food systems, energy systems, and ensuring as well that the flow of finance touches the people who need it the most, young people, and ensuring, for example, as well, that women are fully participating across the economy. So those are a few thoughts to complement what we have already heard, and I very much look forward to not only the continuation of this conversation here, but also to the work of this alliance of financing institutions across the continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jean-Paul Adam. I just wanted to find out if we can take some questions, or are we out completely of time? Babajide, what do you recommend? Do we take questions from the audience now?
It just doesn't work. Is that okay? Can you hear now? Okay. So when we also talk, I want to support Teno's. Can you hear me now? Like hold it where? Okay, yes, I learned from him also hitting like that. Yeah, so when you, yeah, hold it, okay, quick. So regional integration serves a de-risking and what does that mean? So when we talk about even capital within the reinsurance sector, it's also how much global capital or capacity we are able to bring on board to de-risk our projects, right? So Manuel and I work in that sector. And we are only able to convince at the right cost if we are doing it at scale. So as we sit, Minister, in looking at our own countries, it does make sense to always look at a regional project, at regional, allow for better de-risking. Just in the Horn of Africa project that we are leading, which is called the DRIVE project, we've been able to bring in over $200 million in capacity for pasturists in the most drought-struck area of Africa, right? So, but so long as you're able to do it at scale, as a region, not a country, from the insurance perspective, it becomes cheaper, it becomes accessible. I just wanted to say that.
I think that's a really good place for us to have a statement. Taking away with him, and if there's anything else that we can add, Honorable Nabi, over to you.
Thank you very much. Just picking up what Madame was saying, the project that I was referring to, I just want to take one infrastructure, the construction of the railway, which is from the south to the port, 650 kilometers. So we are, developing a highway, which is because Guinea is neighbored by 6 countries. This road gonna be linked to the south to Cote d'Ivoire, to Liberia. This is on the north part gonna link to Mali. On the east part gonna be Senegal. So we are building that road, gonna integrate that region. That's gonna be integrated project, regional project that we are thinking about. So, but I think all these numbers that we're hearing, all these is extremely appealing, is extremely important. But for me, I think what our friend can think about it, is capacity building. Because I remember I've been talking to Moises and also Anne, we've been discussing, but sometimes, if the people on the ground, they don't know the processes, even they want to do, but it will take time. And it take 1 year, 2 years, the process, it gets frustrating. I think they need to put in the agenda to have a clear roadmap, how to access, how to be member, and how to help these countries in order to integrate all these elements. So it's extremely particular. 2 or 3 people might know, but the majority in the system, those need to do approval, they don't know, but it's taking more time. I think the same thing about Afro-Exim Bank. We have a deal with them. We've been discussing, for a while now. I think capacity building is extremely important. We can have all this money if the people are not trained, the people are not well educated, it will never benefit for the country. That's why we still, every time we are saying the same thing again and again. Lastly, I believe you know, our senior is here. I think he's been working for the African Free Trade Area. I mean, also linking African countries. He talked about highways from Libya all the way to come to Nigeria. We've been talking about it. Imagine, guess what? You want to do airline. If I have to fly to Burkina Faso, it's better for me to come to Paris and then go back to that Paris. I think there's something we need to think about it, because the internet connectivity is not there. And this is an issue today. You want to travel in West Africa, is rather you go to Ethiopia and come back. It's a problem. And then if there is no, you know, integration, you know, communication, the economy will never grow. I take an example for Guinea. The last 3 years, if we are taking, for example, in the south of Guinea, we have all these products, bananas and all this, because there's no roads. It takes 3 days. So basically, if the truck is taking all the product from the south, next to Liberia, to come to the capital, it takes 3 days. So 30% of the product is spoiled. So now we've been working to try to make sure that the road is good. But my takeaway on this, we need to have what they call the circular partnerships. I think triangular I've been talking about the last few years, but now we need to move for circular. Circular, all these agencies need to come to sit down to have a roadmap, can be a plan Marshall. Because if we are doing, yes, we want to do projects with countries by Africa, but if all these, be it ATD, be it, you know, ZEPRE, and then Africa Exim Bank, I think you need to sit down to come up to roadmap for the African government. At AAMFI, so AAMFI, and then also our brother from Solidarity Fund. But I think if we can have this circular partnership to sit down, whatever is insurance, funding, let's come out something, even one project, integrated project, it can change life of the people. This is why we want moving forward, as I said, mine is this, but we are using the mining to develop our economy. Because by doing this road, we are developing industrial park with agriculture. We are not even a mining country, we are agriculture country. But there's no money, cannot do agriculture. The farmers, they're still doing the traditional ways, even though because we don't control water. In a country in Southeast Asia, for example, Vietnam, they can do rice 3 times a year. And then we are claiming that, you know, we are buying rice from Vietnam. And we said we have all the land because we don't master water. And now we are doing an example, a Korean, funded by the World Food Organization, we have done a pilot project in Guinea right now. So now they are doing twice a year the product. And then 1 acre is given more than 5 tons. In our agriculture, I mean, one hectare is barely given one ton. So those are the things, that small thing, but we need to think about how to increase the technology and then learn from those who have done it. And Southeast Asia is a great example. Be it, you know, Indonesia, be it all these, it's extremely important. But the last thing is the planification. Everything is a priority in our part of the world. And we wait until last minute that we want to spend. So the money come out, there's no planification. This country, they plan 10 years, 15 years, 40 years ahead. I think moving forward is up to us to do planification. When we plan, stick to the plan, that will help us to develop our countries. So, I mean, the takeaway is looking for circular partnerships, come up together to give 1 or 2 good flagship projects that can cater not only countries, but all areas. One single project can create a catalyst, can develop every area. I was speaking to a colleague of mine, Minister of Energy, when we are talking about all these flagship. Some of them didn't see their ministry name in our 5 pillars. But I would say if the Minister of Commerce need to develop the industrial park, he need energy. So in 15 years' time, the Minister of Energy need to tell us how many megawatt of energy Guinea need to develop to make sure all these things that we are saying we can cut. We're going to do a refinery. If you don't have energy, you cannot do a refinery. We're going to keep taking the raw material out of the country. And our matters in this, you know, fishery. Those are the things like extremely, we have a fish, we have agriculture. The small thing we can develop and can change the life of all the people. So I'm excited to welcome all these agencies in Guinea and then to be part of our program that we are developing. I know we can do together, Shelter Africa, and all these, we're looking forward to receive you. We can do together our plan. You're welcome in Guinea, and then let's do together. Thank you.
Our brother, Mr. Diallo, would like to say something, and then I'll finally end it.
Non, ce que j'aimerais rajouter, mais c'est pas qu'en Guinée, c'est partout. D'accord? Maintenant, quoi faire? Je veux dire, a priori, ce qu'on pourrait faire, c'est que tous ensemble, qu'on cherche à mutualiser au moins nos peu de ressources qu'on a pour pouvoir adresser les difficultés. C'est déjà ça. C'est-à-dire, un assureur peut être complété par un autre, par exemple. Tu vois, une banque par une autre. Essayer de voir ce qu'on peut faire. Et puis, comme c'est en train d'être mis en œuvre, fait au niveau de l'AMFI, le plaidoyer, il est en train d'être construit et je sens qu'il se solidifie véritablement. Il faudra que tous ensemble, qu'on le porte auprès de nos autorités. Et puis, voilà, de sorte à ce qu'ils prennent conscience de la nécessité de renforcer véritablement les institutions de financement du développement. Pas forcément par le budget national, mais qu'on puisse discuter de mécanismes qui permettent véritablement, et je pense que ça, c'est des choses qui existent. Il y a des solutions, d'accord? Voilà, réfléchir à les structurer et puis essayer de voir dans quelle mesure renforcer les fonds. Voilà. Mais pour le moment, ce que je retiens, pour l'exemple de la Guinée par exemple, ce qui ressort, c'est que les besoins sont à un niveau tel que si nous, institutions de financement du développement, voulons appuyer, nous devrons nous mettre ensemble. Ce qui est valable pour la Guinée, l'est pour pratiquement tous les autres pays. Voilà.
What's very interesting is as about to play a larger role in making our process. I hope this is a good summary. Down to the Afreximbank, which making us come down to the Afreximbank, which over the past few years has grown. You grew from 27 billion to $33 billion right now, but you have been making significant interventions and partnering with your brothers and sisters in this entity. What is it that you would like us to go away with as your call to arms?
Thank you very much. I think we are working very well with partner institutions, with commercial banks on the ground, and with governments. In addition to the capital that they are providing, my call is that the privileges and immunities that they've given the institutions so that we operate are coming under attack from our adversaries. So it is important that they back themselves up by honoring their obligations under the treaties establishing these institutions. It's very important that they be seen to be supporting and honoring those obligations.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being patient. Later on, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
While we're here, I'm going to ask the chairperson and the Secretary General to say closing remarks. Please come and take us.
Ladies and gentlemen, so ladies and gentlemen, let me just have your attention for 30 seconds so I can thank you properly.
So your attention for 30 seconds so that I can thank you properly. Again, we're just extremely grateful to the African Union Commission for hosting us. We're extremely grateful to the audience and the participants that have stayed for this long. We're certainly grateful to our members and the principals that have taken the time to be at this event. At this point, we'll say that this is the beginning of a continuing dialogue and a continuing conversation with AAMFI, with our stakeholders, with member states, with partners, as we continue to devise and innovate solutions to address the continent's financing challenges. Again, our apologies for the challenges with the technical issues, but we're very, very grateful for your patience. We must also thank the people that have stayed with us online, particularly those on the continent. We know it is very late in the day, but we're extremely grateful. Thank you very much, and we hope to continue the conversation and dialogue. Thank you.
Okay, do we just finish our...
Yes.
I think it was on my side, was... right.
Bluetooth connected.
Today is quite, I would say, a significant milestone because we've managed to convene an event at the sidelines of the Africa Development Bank annual meetings, to further our conversations around the African Association of Multinational Financial Institutions, or what we call the Africa Club.
What AAMFI stands for and what we are proud of as a member, as a founding member, is that African institutions that were set up to develop the continent are coming together to mobilize our resources, our influence, and be able to do more in Africa.
The Alliance's formation underscores the collective commitment of its members to support Africa's self-reliance and sustainable economic development, leveraging homegrown solutions and resources for the continent's transformation.
We have the duty to transform Africa into an economy that is prosperous, an economy that ensures that everybody, every African, benefits from the process of inclusive growth and sustainable development. And when you look at the reform of the global financial architecture, It's also very, very clear that for Africa to transform, we need a conducive continental environment, and we also need a conducive global environment.
So we need to workshop the best path for us, to achieve our aspirations without having to learn from our own mistakes. So it's important that we continue to convene, have these conversations, and see how we work together for the betterment of our continent.
In March 1975, the African continent rose to its feet, and heads of state came together to realize an ideal of economic and financial solidarity, the African Solidarity Fund, ASF.
Ça fait naturellement de nous une vieille institution. En Afrique, lorsqu'on